Hello, Taylor Ellwood, your mad scientist and magical experimenter at magicalexperiments.com. Wow, last week's video was a doozy, wasn't it? I um, I had a number of you actually comment and check in with me and say, "Hey, are you okay? What's going on?" And let me just say to all of those who did take the time to check in with me, thank you. I really appreciate your concern for me. And let me reassure all of you, nothing truly horrendous happened. I just had a disappointing week in relationship to a class I was trying to launch. You know, sometimes that's the way life goes, and I needed to allow myself to fully feel that disappointment and share it in a way, I suppose, just because it was there and it was so prevalent, and I couldn't really focus on anything else at that time. I've gotten over it since then. You take your lessons and you learn from them. It's kind of funny because today's video is in relationship to that, because I talk a lot about the process of magic and how when you're trying to go for a result, you have to remember that even if you don't get the result you want, you've always gotten a result. And what the result indicates is what you need to go back to and look at. And so last week's video, that was in part me looking at the situation and saying, okay, here's what I'm owning. I'm owning how I didn't do this in my process, and this is why on my end it didn't work, why it failed. A process approach to magic really is about looking at every moving part, every variable, and making sure you understand what's actually happening. I know some people say that you don't need to know how magic works. And my answer always to that is yes, you do. Because if you want to understand why something isn't working the way it's supposed to work, then you need to know what's actually going on. You need to be able to look at it and figure out what is or isn't working, so that you can make changes. Certainly for me last week, in recognizing how much my own expectations had led up to and created such a feeling of attachment that I hadn't been able to let go of what I was trying to do, that contributed to the failure of the process right there. And knowing that, it's like, okay, well, I need to remember that for the future. And fortunately, that's the headspace that I'm in now with some other stuff that I'm doing. I'm just like, okay, I've done what I can. I'm letting it go. So it's really important that you're able to look at your process and recognize those aspects that are or aren't working, and be able to own it, and at the same time be able to make changes to it. The only way you can really get good at anything, whether it's magic or anything else, is by taking the time to learn everything about it and figuring out what you did and what you could change. Now, granted, you're not going to necessarily want to go out there and learn everything, as people will say to me, "Well, you don't need to know how to fix a car in order to drive it." Well, that's true. I don't, and I don't want to go out of my way to necessarily learn how to fix a car. That's not the best investment of my time. But the thing is when people use that old cliche with magic, I kind of think it's funny, because it's like, well, why are you practicing magic then? If you're practicing magic, why don't you want to know what's actually working or how it's working? I know how to drive a car. I know that when I put the key in and I turn it on, there's the ignition, and I know that when I shift the different gears for the car, it allows me to drive or reverse or whatever else. And I know there are certain rules that I need to follow when I'm driving on the road. Those are things I need to know in order to drive. Do I need to know how to fix the car? No, but fixing the car isn't the same thing as driving the car. It's a totally different thing. Well, here's the thing. When you're practicing magic, it's not about just saying, well, I'm going to go and do this spell, and there you go. You need to understand what's actually happening in that spell. And this is also true in other areas of life. If you're doing something, of course you want to know what's going on. You want to understand, because if you don't understand, then guess what? You have no way to make any changes. You have no real control. You're just reacting. Now, hey, if that's the kind of magician you want to be, you just want to react to everything, then be my guest. Do that. But frankly, I don't want to react. And when I find myself reacting, that's when I want to go in and really look at that process, because it's like, okay, what didn't I anticipate? What didn't I look at? And granted, we can all say, well, at the end of the day, Taylor, you're not going to have full control over everything. And you're absolutely right. Last week illustrated that. Part of my problem was that I held on too much. I didn't let go of the control when I needed to. But here's the other thing. Here's the other side of that coin. By knowing and being able to look at what wasn't working for me last week, I was able to own it and start making changes. Could I have made those changes if I didn't know what was going on, if I wasn't able to look at my role and not the role of the other variables? The answer is a big fat no. So folks, don't give me that cliche about, well, you don't need to know how to fix a car to drive a car, because you know what? Driving a car and fixing a car are two separate things. Practicing magic? Yeah, look, folks, if you're going to practice magic, you should know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you need to spend some time figuring it out, because otherwise you're just setting yourself up for a world of hurt. And that's just useless. Alright, so magical experimenters, feel free to leave a comment below if you have one, and if you haven't subscribed yet to this awesome channel, please do so you can get more videos from moi, your magical experimenter and mad scientist at magicalexperiments.com. Take care and have a great week.